Welcome back to the Colts Brawl podcast, you guys. We are excited to give you another great show today. I am your host, Michael Terrazas, with our fellow co-host, Cody Felger, joining us today. It's been a crazy ride from March, ever since this pandemic started, all the way to here. We are a few days away from the start of Colts training camp. I'm pretty excited. How are you feeling, Cody?
Dude, I'm excited. I really am. I'm excited despite the fact that training camp because, people besides the immediate media can't go down there. So, we couldn't go down there this year, even though we had talked about it. But nonetheless, it means football is getting closer. It means there's more topics to talk about. It's been kind of a lull the last few weeks, really the last month. Like, there hasn't been a ton of Colts topics to discuss. And so, super excited to just, finally get back in some conversations. And really have some new content to talk about. So, to answer your question, man, I'm super excited.
Yeah, man. Always excited for the start of sports in general, man. Before we get started here, guys, I just want to put a claimer out there, just a prayer request, guys, for our fellow brother Justin. We don't know the situation with his grandpa right now, but we just ask for y'all's thoughts and prayers, man. Justin, you're our brother. We love you, man. We're praying for you. We're with you, and we hope for the best outcome. All right, man. That's what I wanted to start out with, real quick. So now when the season starts, the first thing we're talking about is basically the start of camp. That's going to be our first topic we're talking about, the start of training camp. Obviously, the rookies are going to be reporting on the 22nd, and then 6 days later on the 28th, the veterans are going to report to training camp. So obviously the rookies are going to get it's like 6 days with the coaches, because this is going to be a very important part of training camp, probably the most important it's ever been, because this is the first time the coaches are actually getting their hands on the player in person instead of virtual through Zoom, on webcams and everything, all that stuff. I'm pretty sure it was a struggle, but they got it done. But nonetheless, man, this is important because the players, they're going to get hands-on with each other, with this playbook, getting in sync this undrafted rookie class, this rookie class that was drafted, man. I'm pretty excited. Cody, when it comes to this camp, how important is this period for the rookies to have with the coaches before the vets come in?
Yeah, I think it's even more critical now than it would have been if we had a regular off season, because there's no rookie mini camp. Really, this is their first time with the coaches, officially since they were drafted. Like, there's been just these few months where they're not allowed to be, doing stuff like that. So I think it's huge for these guys. I really do. Just everything with COVID, unfortunately, this year has kind of hurt, I think, some of these rookies, and will continue to hurt some of these rookies just because of the limited time they're going to have. But I think it is huge for them to just get acquainted with each other a little bit more. I know they maybe met in person a little bit, maybe met in Zoom, but now officially under the NFL mandate, being able to meet in person, I think it's going to be big. I really do. I can't express just how much value it is. I almost wish they had a whole week or two to just be with the coaches, but it'll be good for them to kind of get intertwined, kind of get to each other a little bit more, and then also get intertwined with the team a little bit more when they do come report for training camp and everybody's together. I think it's going to be so much more valuable than, it's always valuable for rookies to go to, their rookie training camp, but I think it's even going to be more valuable with the limited time they're going to have. We're going to talk about the limited preseason. Like, there's just going to be a lot of opportunities for some of these rookies to make an impact, and I think it's going to impact them more than we think. And so to answer your question, I think it is big for them to just have a few days just to be coaches and rookies, get to know these guys a little bit.
Yeah, man. When it comes to the rookies, man, it's for me. Obviously, everybody's going to be looking at Michael Pittman. It's going to be important for him to get in sync, even more in sync with the wide receiver unit, with with this playbook, and that's going to come. That's going to come even faster when the vets get there on the 28th, because you've been with everybody. You're on the same knowledge level with everybody. You're just now learning. You're trying to get in the groove of an NFL camp, of an NFL practice. And then here come the vets. You got Phillip Rivers, who has all this experience. T.Y. Hilton. Paris Campbell is coming back. Zach Pascal is coming back. You got these veterans on the offensive line who want you to know all your stuff. Don't be trying to get in their way or anything. It's going to come full circle, dude, because it's going to be even more important because the vets are going to be there. Michael, Jonathan, Denzel, all these guys are going to be able to ask questions to Marlon, to Todd Rathman, to Frank Reich, Phillip Rivers, T.Y. Hilton, all these guys, man. It's going to be very important, especially like you said, about to start talking about these preseason games. It's going to be big. I'm just excited for the most part because we're going to see our Colts back on the field again here pretty soon. Now, speaking of this Michael Pittman wide receiver stuff, I want to talk about this wide receiver unit, Cody. When the season ended, obviously there were questions about Devin Funchess, Paris Campbell's injury history. What is Chris Ballard going to do to the wide receiver core to address it? We've done that. All right, Paris Campbell is more healthy. He's 100%. T.Y. Hilton is 100%. We drafted Desmond Patman. We drafted Michael Pittman Jr. We got some guys. All right, this wide receiver unit looks promising on paper. Okay, we're about to get into some predictions for this wide receiver unit for the season. Okay. My first prediction right here is that this wide receiver unit is going to finish as a top 10 wide receiver unit. I was tempted to go top 5, but I still don't know how Phillip Rivers is going to perform. We were talking, I had a discussion about, a debate about this on Twitter earlier today about him being a Hall of Famer. And I don't know what to expect from Phillip Rivers. I know everybody wants to think about, Hall of Fame, Super Bowl run. Everybody wants to think about that. But the reality is Phillip Rivers holds his team back sometimes. That's the reality. And I know as Colts fans, we don't want to think about that because he's our guy now. We're behind him. We're supporting him. But that is the reality of much of his career. When he gets to the big game, he doesn't perform. That great Chargers team he had a couple years ago, everybody was talking about them being a Super Bowl contender. And then they go to Foxborough and they get absolutely crushed. And that is the worst game he played that year. Coming into this year, I'm a little bit skeptical of that for this wide receiver unit because it's a dependable unit that's dependent on the quarterback. So, Cody, getting into predictions for this wide receiver unit, I just said they're going to be a top 10 wide receiver unit in my opinion. I expect Michael Pittman. I'm going to say this. My prediction is going to be Michael Pittman has more receiving yards than T.Y. Hilton. That's going to be my first prediction. So I want to go ahead and change it over to you, Cody, and get you ready. What are your predictions for this wide receiver group? And, maybe some Pro Bowl appearances, who's going to be better than the other. What is your opinion on this wide receiver core?
Yeah. And just a disclaimer before I go here, I think there's some things that I'm going to push back on and things that we're going to disagree here, which is totally good. But I'll start with Phillip Rivers first. When you're mentioning, I get it. There's certain games where he hasn't lived up, to how he's been playing. He's struggled in the playoffs and in big moments. But I would argue last year, his team was the reason that they weren't winning. It wasn't him. He was having to do too much. And I think that's the reason why I'm optimistic that Phillip Rivers is going to have a bounce back year. He's a very receiver, tight end, running back friendly quarterback. Like he likes to spread the love around a little bit. And I think the biggest caveat for me is, can these receivers stay healthy? That has been the biggest question mark for me this offseason because last year they couldn't. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, he's been pretty dependable and durable, but last year he got injured. He didn't even play half the games. I mean, it wasn't good for T.Y. Hilton in terms of the injuries. And you always look at receivers and players past the age of 30. And if they're getting injured, is this, the beginning of the end? There's question marks there. Paris Campbell obviously was injured a good amount of last year too. Michael Pittman, we think he's going to be good. I mean, obviously he doesn't drop the football, but you also got to look at what we talked about earlier, right? With the lack of, and I think Michael Pittman out of any of these guys is probably the most pro-ready guy. Right, you can plug and play him a little bit easier than maybe some of the other rookies you drafted, but nevertheless, it's probably going to hurt Michael Pittman's development just a little bit because he's not getting on the field and getting live reps and all that stuff, and not getting more getting in sync more with his quarterback. And when people are always like, I get kind of having some of the high predictions for this Colts offense, but for me, I'm cautiously optimistic because there are so many new guys coming into this Colts offense. I mean, you got a new quarterback, you got you got a new running back potentially, new starting running back down the line, new wide receivers, new tight ends. You got a lot of new things. While obviously it should make you more explosive. It's just hard for me to say on paper right now that this is going to be a top 10 unit because for one, I talked about the injuries. Michael Pittman, we think he's going to be good. We think he's going to be a solid receiver for the Colts here, but COVID has really impacted maybe his development early on. So I don't know. For me, top 10's a little bit hard for me to say just because I haven't seen all these guys together. I haven't seen them all be on the field and prove that they can stay healthy yet. You got some other guys, though, that are interesting. Rhys Fountain, potentially. I know he was really coming on the end of last preseason. You got Marcus Johnson, who you brought back. He's probably a dependable guy that you'll probably want to keep on your roster. You can play some special teams, help you out in the passing department. Denzel Patman. He's a guy that's just a big physical freak, but he's still pretty raw, so he'll probably be a practice squad guy. You have some interesting names, but I think for me, I don't know. It's hard for me to say they'll be top 10 just because I have not seen them on the field together. I mean, I've predicted some things in the past where on paper it looked really, really nice, but then when it came down to actually performing, they didn't perform. And I'm not going to say necessarily that'll be the case with the wide receiver group. I think they definitely have improved and given themselves a chance to improve. But for me, it's hard to say just because on paper they're going to be better. I think they will be better, but it's hard for me to say top 10 just quite yet. In terms of, you mentioned Michael Pittman having more receiving yards. I don't know if he's going to have more receiving yards just because I don't think that's the type of wide receiver he is in terms of getting more yards. I think he's going to definitely have more touchdowns. He's probably going to lead the team in touchdowns out of the wide receivers, I think, because he's more of that red zone threat. Eric Ebron's obviously not here. So he's going to get a lot more of those chances. He doesn't drop passes, which will help him in the long run. But honestly, I think I'm going to throw out a guy that's a little bit of a wild card. Paris Campbell, I mentioned him. I think he has a chance to lead the Colts in receiving yards because it's not necessarily like he's going to get – I don't think he's going to have the most catches out of any of these receivers, but he has the most home run ability out of any of these guys. Like if you just get the ball in his hands, we saw in a few games last year, he can turn on his jets and he can go, right? There's a reason why the Colts took him so early last year. I mean, he's one of the fastest wide receivers in the league. He's just a big play waiting to happen. And if he can stay healthy, I think he definitely has a chance to maybe challenge for, leading the Colts in receiving yards just because we know how much Phillip Rivers loves to just give his guys chances. And Paris Campbell still needs to develop his route running, obviously, but just using him how they used him at Ohio State, I mean, I think that gives them a really good chance to be a lot more explosive this year than they were last year. So that's kind of my take on the wide receiver group, a little bit different from you. But I think Phillip Rivers ultimately has a better support system in terms of protection on the offensive line. I would say he has just more options. I mean, I know the Chargers have some pretty elite options, but I think overall he's going to be supported more in the running game. He's just going to be supported more in general. So that's kind of my take, I guess, on the wide receiver group.
And that's interesting because I like the Paris Campbell wild card pick. I like him because remember when we thought that he was going to have a really good quarterback, there were a couple of guys at NFL Network that pinned him as the offensive rookie of the year because of that home run ability. And I'm completely with you on Paris Campbell because you look at T.Y. Hilton, you look at Michael Pittman Jr., most will say those two are the alphas of the group. But the thing that makes this wide receiver unit so scary for me, which is why I want to put them top 10, is because of Paris Campbell. You want to double team Like, do the Bill Belichick analogy. You want to double team the number one guy. You want to put your number one corner on Michael Pittman. Well, we still have a guy in Paris Campbell who can develop even more, who can become a better route runner, who can have that home run ability. And then a Zach Pascal, who I really like. Zach Pascal, who is going to get better, stronger, faster, and is developing me in even more. And that's why I love this wide receiver group so much, to where I want to put them in the top 10. Now, all those precautions that you put down, I absolutely agree with. The injuries, the pro ready, all of that. When I look at Michael Pittman Jr., I see Michael Thomas. I am not, and I believe I even said that in the pre-draft before we even drafted them, because he was one of my top 5 guys that I wanted in a Colts uniform. And the number one guy I thought of when I turned on Michael Pittman's tape was Michael Thomas. That alone is why I'm excited for him, and why I'm kind of probably, prematurely overhyping him a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I haven't even seen him in a Colts helmet yet. So I haven't even seen him lace up shoulder pads yet. So, but keeping on with the predictions for this unit, I want to get into some predictions. Okay. I want to know how many wide receivers are going to make the final cut, 55-man final cut for the roster, and who. I'll go ahead and start. I'm going to go they carry 6 wide receivers. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now, just like they did last year, because I think there's going to be some really good talent in this group. Now, from a depth chart standpoint, number 1, obviously T.Y. Hilton. Number 2, I'm going to go Michael Pittman. Okay. Number 3, I'm going to go Paris Campbell. Number 4, I'm going to go Zach Pascal. Okay. Number 5, I'm going to go Marcus Johnson. Okay. Because I really liked what I saw from him last season. He had a little bit of that deep threat ability. Obviously, those big catches in Tampa Bay. He really showed me that he can play in this league, because I had some doubts about him. But last year really showed me some good things. He showed me some really good things. And don't forget, he had a big game against the Jets of 2018. Remember, we had those injuries. We had to bring him up again. He had a pretty good game against the Jets in 2018. So I have him as my 5th guy. Now, as my 6th guy, my 6th and final guy, look, this one was tough, because I'm pretty set on this one for training camp. I don't think I'm changing this anytime soon. But I think I'm going to go with Rhys Fountain over Desmond Patman from Washington State, our rookie that we drafted. I like his ability as a wide receiver, but like you said, I think he'll need more development. With Rhys Fountain, hopefully he doesn't go down the same path as Deion Kane. Hopefully he is a mainstay for the Colts. Hopefully that he continues to get better, recovering from that horrible injury he had. I hope he gets better. He has that same leaping ability, that physical ability. I'm going to go ahead and bank on him to make the roster as the 6th and final wide receiver. Desmond Patman, he will be going to the practice squad. Cody, what are your predictions for this wide receiver unit?
Yeah, and in order to do this, I had to kind of look at the other positions as well, because the Colts have obviously before carried, 4 tight ends. They've carried 4 running backs. Last year, they carried 4 running backs. Even the year before, they carried 4 running backs. It just was Jonathan Williams just wasn't active most games, but he was on the active roster. So, just thinking about how many they're going to keep, and also the offensive line. You lose 2 key pieces there. How many guys do you keep in the offensive line? Somewhere between 8 and 10, I think. I probably would go 9 there. So it was dependent on that, but kind of looking at the tight end group, you really have 3 guys who are probably going to make the roster. I don't know what you would label Roosevelt next. He's technically a fullback, but would you put him kind of like a blocking tight end? So then you keep 4 running backs. That's just tough for me to do that. And I don't want to lose Jordan Wilkins either. So there comes down to some numbers crunching that you're going to have to do in order to make this work, I guess. And so I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to keep 6 wide receivers just because I feel like you just have so many other positions. And you mentioned, even with Rhys Fountain, I mean, he hasn't played really a meaningful snap besides that Kansas City playoff game in his career. So he hasn't really had much game experience himself. I don't know if the Colts would be more willing to, keep Jordan Wilkins, Roosevelt Nix, as opposed to kind of an unproven wide receiver at this point, and keep maybe some of them on the practice squad and let them continue to develop, especially with this year, how it's hurting their development. I might go with 5, honestly, because, I would keep Marcus Johnson as your 5. Then you have 5 wide receivers that you feel like you can feel pretty good about. They all know the system in and out. That's probably where I would go, honestly. And I would keep Roosevelt Nix as kind of your fullback / running back. And I might keep Jordan Wilkins as well. So, you got a lot more skilled position guys like that. But in that, I think that'll impact ultimately your wide receiver group. If it was normal, I might be a little more, open to hearing the conversation about keeping more wide receivers. I just think simply at this point, you just got to keep guys who are in the system and kind of know it a little bit more. And I think that's why I think the Phillip Rivers signing was so key, of getting a guy who knows this offense so well that you're not drafting a rookie and he has to figure out the playbook with limited time. It's already limited time from the draft to, week 1, but even less time now. And so that's kind of my argument, I guess, for why I would definitely keep only 5 wide receivers. And I know that might be a little bit controversial. I'm not really sure, but that's kind of my argument. And I'm curious to hear kind of your rebuttal and kind of your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, I don't really have too much rebuttal on that. I like the idea because, like you said, what do we name Roosevelt Nix? I think at the end of the day, because you have so many running backs, I think you're going to name him a tight end. That's my number one guess. He certainly has that capability. Obviously, the blocking capability. I don't think the Colts are interested in having him run routes. But if you want, because the biggest thing for Roosevelt Nix, obviously you signed him to clear a path for the running game. Obviously, what other reason did you sign him for? You can keep him on as a tight end, but obviously when you get to those 3rd and 1s, those 4th and 1s, those goal line situations, bring him in for what you brought him in for. Put him on the field for what you brought him in for. And if the Colts were to go 5 wide receivers, I'll tell you this right now. I'm kind of with you on the experience. If I had to choose one guy out of 3, Marcus Johnson, Desmond Patman, and Rhys Fountain, I'm going Marcus Johnson because he has game experience. He has much more experience than the 2 others. Okay, that's where I'm at with that whole thing. If it came down to 5, I'll take Marcus Johnson.
Yeah, I would totally do that too. I just think it makes sense because he's been in the system a little bit more. Even in Philadelphia, he was in that system too. So, I mean, he's known Frank Reich's system ever since he's been in the league. I think that just gives him a leg up on some of these guys, especially, with the lack of time now, getting chemistry with Phillip Rivers and getting acquainted to this offense. I really, Marcus Johnson would definitely be my number 5. I think he's going to be the number 5, regardless if they keep 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only reason I would say keep 6 is just if you believe that one of these guys, Desmond Patman and Rhys Fountain, or you can't stash them on the practice squad for a year, you think they're going to get scooped up and you see the potential in them and you're kind of willing to let them play special teams and continue to develop. That would be the only reason I would see you doing that. But honestly, I think at this point, you know what you got in some of these guys, and I would kind of roll with them at this point and kind of, let Rhys Fountain develop on the practice squad a little bit more. Let Desmond Patman develop and learn this offense on the practice squad. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of the wide receiver group. It's certainly going to be an interesting debate, though. What if Rhys Fountain, picks up where he left off and he's tearing it up in training camp again and he looks like the same player he did? Then that may be worth another conversation. And what if Jordan Wilkins isn't, what if he kind of struggles, whatever happens there? There's a lot of ifs. And training camp's certainly going to be a deciding factor, I think, on how the Colts handled this wide receiver position. But strictly before training camp, that's my prediction. But it definitely could change if a guy like Rhys Fountain or Desmond Patman all of a sudden is showing you stuff and you're like, we cannot afford to risk them potentially being picked up by another team. That would be my only reason.
Yeah. All good points all over the place, Cody. Speaking of something you mentioned earlier, having a leg up on guys, this is sort of, I guess you could say, a con on the players' part. The preseason has been cut in half. It was 4 games. Now they've cut it down to 2. From a fan's point of view, I mean, who cares? I mean, we don't care for the preseason. Let's get to the season. But on the players' side, Cody, obviously this is going to hurt people. You know, some people like a Desmond Patman, who we're talking about potentially trying to make this roster. Rhys Fountain, you know, he wants as many reps as he can get to show that he can make this roster, that he's ready and taking the next step and to make this roster. The pros and cons of having 2 preseason games. I'll go ahead and start this off. Obviously, for the reasons that I just mentioned, it speeds it up, I guess you could say, as a fan. You don't really care for the preseason games. You're just ready for the season to start. The Colts are going to be starting, they're going to be starting against the new Washington name. That's going to be the first game. Another pro for me, it's going to be about, I think everybody comes out of this healthier, if I'm being honest. I think everybody comes out of this preseason slate healthier. That's going to be the biggest thing for me. Now, when it comes to the cons, I mean, for the reasons I just listed, those are the 2 guys that we're talking about, Desmond Patman and Rhys Fountain. But what about guys like a Jake Elderkamp? What about LaRaven Clark? What about a Danny Pinter, an Isaiah Rodgers, guys who are thought of as maybe some bubble guys? What's that going to do for them? Guys like Kendall Coleman, these bubble guys need as many reps as possible. But with these 2 games, especially the fourth game, that's when all of your starters sit. We're not going to have that. Now, obviously, I expect the Colts to have scrimmages that are in place of these games. Obviously, that was my number one thing that I thought of thinking about training camp. They'll have scrimmages. In these preseason games, I think the Colts are going to have a really good idea of who's not going to play. Obviously, Phillip Rivers doesn't play preseason games, so we won't see him in the preseason. T.Y. Hilton won't play. Anthony Costanzo, Quentin Nelson, I believe those guys, they probably get in a series, but they won't play, I don't believe, for the entirety of the preseason. Justin Houston, I don't expect him to suit up. DeForest Buckner, to be honest, even though he's 26, I don't expect him to suit up either. He's the biggest acquisition, higher than Phillip Rivers of the offseason. Keep him healthy as much as possible. Maybe Xavier Rhodes doesn't play. Kenny Moore, that's probably going to allow some more reps for these guys, but I just can't help but think time is of the essence. Obviously, you want to see them going up against someone else, against someone else's scheme, not your own. That's going to be the biggest thing for me with this training camp. Where are you at? The pros and cons of a shortened preseason, Cody?
Yeah, and talking about some of the pros, obviously you mentioned it. I think the biggest thing is less risk of injury, less chances of injury, I should say. I'm only playing 2 preseason games, but it is going to be a little harder to evaluate some of these guys based off of only 2 preseason games as opposed to 4. So some of these guys are going to have to make a bigger impression. Like, you think of some of those guys in the past who have not really done much in the first couple preseason games, but then they've been tearing it up. Like even Rhys Fountain last year was tearing it up more at the end of the preseason, and the 3rd and 4th game as opposed to the first game. So I think for some of the veterans, certainly it's a pro for them because maybe some of those younger guys, Isaiah Rodgers, if you're talking about Xavier Rhodes, it kind of gives you a little bit more breathing room because those guys are gonna need some more time to develop. But on the flip side, the Colts are in an interesting situation because they have a quarterback Band-Aid, if you will, in Phillip Rivers for a couple of years, at least 1 year, maybe a couple of years. But for a guy like Jacob Eason, who's still pretty raw, still needs to develop in a lot of ways, it's going to hurt his development because really he's not going to see any meaningful snaps in the regular season. So he's not going to see any live reps. He's not going to get any game time experience much. I just think it's going to hurt his development a little bit more. And maybe could, if for whatever reason it doesn't work out with Phillip Rivers, he's only here for 1 year. Well, shoot, then you only have Jacob Eason under contract this next year. Do you potentially think about bringing back a Jacoby Brissett or using your first round pick on a quarterback? There's just a lot of unknowns at this point. Yeah, and then some of the other rookies, some of the other young guys, you think about some of those guys, Michael, who have gotten a chance at times and shown out in the preseason and turned into pretty nice players in this league. They may not be given the same opportunity that they would have been given, say they play 4 preseason games. And so that would be a negative impact just on some of those guys and some of the opportunities that they're given. And maybe the Colts, could miss out on some chances to find some nice, kind of under the radar guys, maybe later round picks, just because you can't afford to wait on them because it's going to be a lot more of a learning curve than it would have normally been. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of the pros and cons of this preseason.
I'm really interested to see how they play out Jacob Eason, because obviously Phillip Rivers isn't going to play. I mean, I just don't see him playing at all in the preseason. So obviously you're going to probably see Jacoby Brissett for a game, and then that second and last game of the preseason against Buffalo, I fully expect to see Jacob Eason play one half and Chad Kelly play the other. That is probably the only thing I'm probably intrigued by this preseason, is to see how much playing time and how he plays in Jacob Eason. I fully expect these 3 guys to make the roster. Chad Kelly, I wouldn't be surprised if he made the practice squad because, like you said, other than Jacob Eason, you don't have another guy on contract for 2021. So maybe you want to keep him as an insurance policy. Isaiah Rodgers trying to crack into that quarterback depth. That's going to be the biggest thing as we head into training camp, guys, when this live reps matter in the NFL, especially in preseason. Even though we know who the starters are going to be, the biggest thing about a football team is their depth. It's going to be about the depth, trying to find the right pieces behind your starters. That's going to be the biggest thing for this. Now, before we end this, there was 4 preseason games the Colts had. Week 1 against Philadelphia, that is a no-go. And the preseason finale against Cincinnati, the Colts will not be seeing Joe Burrow, although I'm pretty sure he probably wouldn't have played that game anyway. So those 2 games are out. The Colts are going to face Washington. I believe these dates are still set in stone. Monday, August 24th against Washington. I don't know who the mascot, what the name is going to be, but they'll be playing Washington. And then they'll be playing Buffalo in Buffalo. So those are going to be the 2 games that these bubble guys, these rookies, are going to be getting some live reps against. Before we hop off here, guys, Cody, do you have anything else you would like to add on today's show?
No, beyond the fact that I'm excited that hopefully everything is proceeding according to plan and that we can actually have an NFL season. It's going to obviously look modified and look different, but I'm excited nonetheless for something, for football. I mean, we need it right now. It's just been craziness. So excited to just be able to talk about fresh stuff. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, be able to just talk some more football, kind of having a little bit of escape for people in the craziness of the world, and coming back from Monday 9 to 5 job type of thing. Just hopefully that this podcast can just be something where people can come in and feel like they can just discuss Colts football. And I'm super excited that football is back and that we have the ability to do that, because it's been a very long off season, and I'm really excited that we can be back. And training camp's always such a fun time of year.
All right. Well, guys, for the time being, we are getting football. I truly hope that this works out. But if at the end of the day, guys, people's safety is just on the line and it's not working out, then you know what? We're probably not going to have football this year. But for the most part, guys, right now, everybody is reporting for training camp. The league, the NFL, all of them, they're still trying to get these health protocols in order. I know they're probably going to have some quarantine zones if players happen to test positive. So that's going to be something to watch every single minute of this training camp process. So, guys, by the next time we get on the show, there's going to be football, new headlines to talk about. So I am your host, Michael Terrazas. Cody Felger joined me. You guys stay blessed, stay safe. And hey, man, sports is coming back. Y'all stay blessed.